Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're testing one of the cheapest monitors we've ever looked at on the channel, the Viotek GFV24C. This is a 24-inch 1080p 144Hz gaming monitor with a flat VA panel, which is in contrast to the curved models Viotek and other manufacturers have traditionally sold. I've recommended the Viotek GN24C for some time now, but this latest model, the GFV24C, not only offers a flat panel, which some people prefer, but a cheaper price tag at under $150 and sometimes as low as $140. So immediately this monitor provides quite a compelling value proposition. Great entry-level gaming monitor specs, new VA panel that avoids a common complaint by being flat, and a super affordable price tag for budget gamers. Plus we get adaptive sync support, and it's covered under Viotek's zero dead pixel policy and 3-year warranty, which is pretty good for this class of product. The budget gaming monitor space is pretty crowded and very competitive though. Just a few dollars here and there can make or break a product, so we'll have to see how the GFV24C fares in our usual performance testing and whether it's a better buy than displays from competing brands, as well as in Viotek's own highly affordable lineup. As expected, the build here is nothing amazing. Cutting down on build quality is a pretty common way monitor manufacturers reduce the overall product cost, and we see that here. Viotek have used a very basic plastic stand with a lightweight circular base and simple pillar. At first I thought there was no way this plastic base would be heavy enough to prevent the display from tipping over, and that's not quite true. It's fine when just sitting on your desk, but it's also not that stable. Any sort of bump will make it wobble pretty considerably. The GFV24C also lacks adjustability. We only have tilt support here, there's no height adjustment, and this means the monitor sits quite low on a desk. However, lacking height adjustability is very common among entry-level displays. Occasionally you see some that do include a height adjustable pillar, but this adds to the unit cost, which is why most don't. So to me, this isn't as big of an issue as it would be with, say, a mid-range monitor. While the build quality is pretty cheap and uninspiring, the actual design I think is decent. It's somewhat of a slim monitor with an interesting wedge shape to the rear, and on the front, Viotek have done their best to cut down on the bezels. I like the simplicity here, and from the front I think it's a slightly better aesthetic than the curved GN24C. I also appreciate that it's flat. I've mentioned in many reviews before that I don't think having a curved monitor of this size and aspect ratio is particularly great, so it's a neat change given Viotek's previous budget offering in this space was curved. And for this sort of monitor, cheap, 1080p, 24-inch VA, it opens up the door for usage as a secondary display. You can't really use a curved monitor as a second display very effectively in my opinion, but this guy is flat, has decent viewing angles due to VA, it has VESA mounting support, and it gives you a high refresh rate experience, which is still beneficial for desktop app usage. Inputs on the GFV24C are decent, 2 HDMI ports, 1 display port, plus an audio output jack. Nothing fancy here, but that gets the job done. Unfortunately, on the flip side, the on-screen display is not very good. It's hard to navigate because it's controlled through face buttons rather than a directional toggle, and there are very few interesting features in here. With just a few crosshairs, very basic color controls, and a low blue light mode, this is a bare bones experience, which again, I don't think is all that unusual for a budget monitor, but if you're expecting anything more, prepare to be disappointed. Before I get into the response time discussion, just a few usual notes here about the refresh rate. 144Hz is decent. I had no trouble using this monitor with either AMD or Nvidia GPUs with adaptive sync and low frame rate compensation. Flickering can be an issue with budget monitors as they cheap out on the scaler, but I didn't see any flickering issues here, and as with any monitor, flickering issues is a defect and should be RMA'd anyway. So response times. Here's where the GFV24C begins to disappoint. Unfortunately, there is no overdrive mode available here. I looked through every setting in the limited on-screen display and couldn't find any that changed response time performance, so it's clear this monitor comes with no adjustable overdrive. And as you can see from how it performs, yeah, that's pretty disappointing. A gray to gray average of 12 milliseconds is slow by modern standards and far too slow to keep up with the 144Hz refresh rate. This means smearing is quite common, and I'm not just talking about dark level smearing. Yes, the dark level average is poor at 14 milliseconds, but pretty much every rising transition and nearly all the falling transitions as well aren't fast enough to keep up with the 6.94 milliseconds refresh window. When the response time exceeds this refresh window, different frames begin to to smear together, and you get quite a bit of blur as a result. You can see from the refresh rate compliance numbers that just 15% of transitions are within an acceptable tolerance of the refresh window at 144Hz. So this is far below what is required for a true 144Hz experience. This is more in the range suitable for a 75Hz refresh rate, not 144Hz, although of course, even with a 75Hz refresh rate, you still get a bit of ghosting. Lower response times are always better. The good news, I guess, is there is no inverse ghosting due to low error rates, but this is easily negated by high levels of ghosting. The idea with overdrive is to minimize both ghosting from slow response times and inverse ghosting from high overshoot, but without proper overdrive functionality here, we're left with no overshoot but significant ghosting. What's interesting about this is Viotek advertises the GFV24C as a 4ms monitor with overdrive. It quite clearly says this on their product page, and they even call this a crazy fast 4ms response time. From what I can tell, if there is any overdrive functionality, it's extremely limited, and of course, as I mentioned, can't be changed through the OSD. Viotek do hit 4ms response times here, but only for a fraction of the overall transition, so it's a bit misleading to advertise this sort of performance as 4ms. The story only gets worse at lower refresh rates. At 120Hz, we're already dropping down to a 13ms grey-to-grey average, and then at 60Hz, performance is straight up terrible with an 18ms average. Even at 60Hz, only 45% of transitions fall within the long 16.7ms refresh rate window, which is not good enough. The monitor really needed to, at the very least, maintain its 144Hz performance at lower refresh rates, but it doesn't. When we look through some comparison graphs, this is not a good story for the GFV24C. This monitor is much slower than other 1080p 144Hz monitors and succumbs to a similar fate to the Acer Nitro VG271P, which can't change its overdrive mode when adaptive sync is enabled. Competing options like Pixio's PXC243 and Viotek's own GN24C are much faster, although $10 to $20 more expensive. The LG 24GL600F also has to be in the conversation here. It's a TN monitor, so there are some downsides there, but it's often available in the same price range as this GFV24C. Surprisingly, the GFV24C doesn't have the worst dark level average of the monitors I've tested, but it's not exactly great either. The issue this monitor faces isn't really dark level smearing, but the lack of overdrive that improves the rest of the panel's performance, which leads to the worst refresh rate compliance in our charts and a monitor that I can't say delivers a 144Hz experience equivalent to others in this chart. The GN24C looks really good here, for example. As I mentioned, error rates aren't a problem for this monitor, but it's not much of a problem for the others either. The GN24C, for example, has an average error rate of just 3.3% despite offering over twice the response time performance, and inverse ghosting rates of 5.5% are a bit higher than the GFV24C's admittedly decent 0%, but as we're still below our standard 15% threshold, neither offers any significant inverse ghosting problems. The GFV24C looks really bad in our 60Hz test, which is unfortunate as it means performance gets progressively worse throughout the adaptive sync range rather than better or staying the same like with monitors such as the GN24C. Input lag is fine as far as processing lag goes. We're sub 2.0 milliseconds here, which is decent for a budget display, but the slow response times really hammer overall input latency. The monitor is slow to transition, and that means it's slow to display your inputs on the screen. Power consumption is average, slightly better than the GN24C, but it's a much of a muchness. There's really no issues here. For color performance, not expecting anything amazing here as it's a budget monitor, and we're not getting any wide gamut capabilities as expected. In fact, we're not quite hitting the entire sRGB spectrum here at just 96% coverage, but we're pretty close, and this isn't unusual for an entry-level panel. Once again though, we do find several issues when looking at grayscale performance. It's pretty obvious from these charts that the GFV24C does not come with even an attempt at factory calibration. The CCT curve on the left should be flat, but instead it's a big arch, and that's because the gamma curve in the middle dips well below the yellow sRGB line. And you can see the effect of that all in the delta E average chart, which is 4.6 on average, but clearly well above 5.0 for midtones. The issue here is all down to that incorrect gamma curve. White balance is slightly wrong and tinted towards the blue end of the spectrum, but a gamma of just 1.8 is far too low. What that means is that midtones are brighter than they should be, which gives the panel a washed out look from the factory. I immediately noticed this when I first turned it on, and I suspect most of you will too. This has a ripple effect throughout the rest of the monitor's performance, with most Delta E averages above 4.0. A result in color checker of 5.27 is particularly bad. The display really is all over the shop in its default configuration. Unfortunately, with such limited on-screen controls, there isn't much that can be done here aside from tightening up white balance concerns. There's no gamma control in the OSD at all, so the primary issue can't be addressed outside of a software profile. That's very disappointing given gamma options are quite common among monitors, but it's not the end of the world, as even if you don't have access to a software profile, you can use the Windows color management tools to adjust gamma in a worst case scenario. What you're seeing here are the results from a full calibration though, and what it shows is the panel is actually quite decent when the problems are fixed, at least at sRGB reproduction. There's a slight fall off at the top end with some colors, particularly blues, being able to unreach the full saturation necessary for sRGB, but it gets close enough. I'm not sure how many buyers will face these gamma issues out of the box, but if this was a problem with your unit, we do offer the ICC profile we create for all our reviewed monitors on Patreon. As we always note though, due to variances from the factory, using these profiles won't deliver a pure color accurate experience for everyone. Peak brightness is disappointing at just 230 nits, which admittedly is right on what Viotek claims. This won't make the GFV24C a good monitor for bright environments, but in standard indoor lighting or at night, this is more than sufficient. However, it is a bit lower than what is offered with the GN24C. One of the strongest areas to performance is contrast, with the GFV24C offering comfortably over 3000 to 1 with this VA panel. The GN24C in comparison is still decent at 3000 to 1, but the GFV24C is that small amount higher. You can also expect decent viewing angles, not the best I've seen and not IPS grade, but good enough for usage as a secondary monitor, especially without the curve. Uniformity is also quite strong. The bottom edge does fall away slightly compared to the center, but overall this monitor is quite uniform, which is a change from previous VA monitors, most of which struggle in this area. This is the second budget VA I've tested recently that has really impressed me with uniformity, so hopefully this is another sign of a trend. Alright, we're done with testing. What do I think of this monitor? Well, I'd almost say there's three ways to look at the Viotek GF24C. We have from a performance perspective, from a value perspective, and then an outright price perspective. So I'll cover all three of those here. From a pure performance perspective, I'd say the GFV24C is mostly poor and sometimes straight up terrible. Response time performance is especially bad, with plenty of ghosting no matter the refresh rate, leading to an experience that isn't really in line with other 144Hz monitors. It has no trouble actually hitting 144Hz, so no skipped frames, but the added smoothness is offset by significant blur. And I don't think it's poor just because it's a low-end product. Of course, entry-level monitors aren't going to perform like expensive flagships, but it's poor in comparison to monitors that are about the same price, and you would have seen all of that in the charts. Factory color performance is poor as well, with at least for my unit, gamma that was way off. This can be corrected with a software profile, but the out-of-the-box experience was washed out and not very impressive. The build quality is in line with budget monitors, so nothing amazing, and the brightness levels are weak. The consolation here is that viewing angles, contrast, and uniformity are all pretty good and better than its competitors, which makes this a decent second monitor option. Normally, I'm a big fan of value monitors. Anything that offers decent specs and performance at a low price, tends to get my tick of approval. After all, why spend more on something that's just as good as a cheap option? But with the GFV24C, I think there's a strong case to be made for spending more. Yes, as of this recording, the GFV24C is retailing for just $140 US, which is very cheap, but the Viotek GN24C, basically the curved version of this monitor, is just $150, and it's significantly better in most areas of performance, especially response times, which makes it an absolute no-brainer purchase given it's just $10 more expensive. I do understand that in these budget categories, every cent can matter, but the GN24C is a lot better for not a lot more. The value equation in this instance is well in favor of the curved variant. I think this will actually catch many buyers out, given they are listed under the same page on Amazon, along with most of Viotek's other monitors. I think some people will be swayed into buying the GFV24C because it's a flat version of the GN24C for less money. If you only saw the spec sheets, that'd be a great option, but in reality, the curved model, the GN24C, is the one you want. Of course, there are other great value options as well, depending on your region, because understandably, this Viotek monitor is not available in many countries. Here in Australia, for example, I'd recommend Kogan's 24-inch GN24C equivalent, which is just $200. AOC also have decent budget offerings in their G1 and G2 lines, while the LG 24GL600F is a great TN equivalent that is often available for less than $150. And this brings me to the final perspective, which is the outright price perspective. As far as I can tell, the GF24C is basically the cheapest 1080p 144Hz monitor with a flat VA panel. So if you absolutely must have a flat VA screen, or if you don't have $1 more than $140 to spend, yeah, I guess you could justify this display. A great use case could be a second monitor, for example, where curved screens don't work well and where you wouldn't want to go TN due to poor viewing angles, but you want to retain a high refresh rate. That sort of use case where gaming isn't a primary focus and you specifically need what this monitor offers, sure, maybe buy it. But for an average gamer wanting an entry-level monitor offering great value, I'd be all over the GN24C. It's still an excellent buy. That's it for this one. As always, you can subscribe for more monitor reviews, and we appreciate all the support we get for our monitor testing from our Patreon. So if you want to sign up and get all the perks there, like some of our monitor profiles, like discussing monitors and other sorts of PC hardware with us in our Discord chat, yeah, check the links in the description below and sign up. We also have merch available. I think this limited edition item will only be available for a very short amount more time. It'll be, yeah, discontinued shortly. So if you're interested in that, do check it out through the links below as well. And yeah, back to more monitor testing. I'll catch you in the next one.